I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. The council is connected by Zoom, as we still are in the emergency operations due to the pandemic. So the present in the key staff as well as myself are located at the Merit Center this evening. We have an agenda before us. Are there any changes to that agenda this evening? If not, we'll operate under that agenda. The first item then would be to consider the approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting that was held on June 9th, 2020. Council does have, before we do that, because we are connected by distance, we will have a roll call, and that will also be a time to check sound. And I'll ask City Clerk Kyle Box to take the roll. Yes.
Steve Meister. Glenn Bearcoller.
Here.
John DeCreamer.
Here.
Russ Labatt.
Present.
Jim Lazinski.
Here.
Thank you, Kyle. We do have a quorum of the council present. Now we'll move to agenda item number 2 to consider the approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting from June 9th. Council has those minutes. Are there any corrections to note at this time?
Mr. Mayor, I apologize to Kyle Box, but I have one correction on the Veterans Memorial bids and update. Kyle, I think that number, the Bendrite Fabrication, had the low quote of 42,742. On the minutes is 272.
We'll make that correction. Are there any other corrections?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Russ, seconded by Jim to approve the minutes with that correction. We'll move to a vote. Kyle, will you take the vote?
Mayor Burns.
Yes.
Glenn Bearcoller.
Yes.
John DeCreamer.
Yes.
Russ Labatt.
Yes.
Jim Lazinski.
Yes.
And the motion does pass. We'll move then to our public hearings. We have 3 public hearings this evening. The first public hearing would be a public hearing on the ordinance amending the height modifications and yard modifications on the accessory buildings and accessory equipment. So with that, I believe Ilya, you're on the connected by Zoom. I'll ask Ilya to open this public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor Council. This change, we are talking about ordinance amending several sections: height modification, yard modification, accessory building, and accessory equipment. These changes are mostly technical in nature and also based on experience of staff with people talking and actual actions. So we were trying mostly to make it easier for people to do some things which staff doesn't see a problem with, and reduce the requirements of the ordinance in most cases. As you can see, there are several examples of that thing. We're allowing to build the front door landing without a variance. We are allowing larger accessory structures and so on. There are also some changes related to a change to interim use permit. Now we have a concept of interim use permit in the ordinance, and also related to the tree policy adoption. So it has something to do with some clearances. So that's basically the whole thing in a nutshell. But if you have any questions, I can try to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Ilya. We'll note for the record that Councilmember Schaefer was able to connect to the meeting, and we also Councilmember Meister is attempting to connect at this point. Okay, so with the public hearing, I'll entertain open up for any input from either the council or anyone else regarding this public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, Russell Bat, just a clarification, are we conducting the public hearing on landscaping and storage, or is the height modifications?
I was going by what the mayor said.
So that's the height modification.
Height
yeah.
modification, correct.
So it's it's item number 4, is that correct on the agenda?
It is item number 4, yes, and then we'll do item number 3. Thank you for that correction.
Okay. Just a question on that, Ilya, on, I believe it's B5, according to fences shall not exceed 7 feet in height in any of the classes of residential and business district. Is that a normal height for fences?
Yes, correct. The 7 feet is standard height allowed by the code without a permit.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Any other input as part of the public hearing?
Russ, to answer your question, and Ilya's answer is fine, but most fences are even numbers, 4, 6, 8. So 7 feet is an odd number. No, that is not a normal height for a fence, but is giving our residents the benefit of a doubt. They build a 6-foot fence and have it 6 inches off the ground.
And that's probably why the building code changed that number to allow it without a building permit.
Okay. Ilya, one other question on number B11. It says in the form of a driveway that shall be paved and blah, 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 accessory building. We had an issue in Westwood Drive with somebody wanting to build a garage in the back of their house. So if this is the case, they would not need a driveway. Is that correct?
They will not need to have a driveway going from the street all the way to the garage.
That's
They will
correct.
still
Okay.
need to have to pave the required front yard and the access.
Okay, thank you.
Other input as part of the public hearing? If not, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second,
Motion by Russ, seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Kyle, will you take the vote?
Mayor Burns,
Yes.
Craig Schaefer,
yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
yes,
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
Yes,
Jim Lozinski.
Yes.
And the motion does pass. The action then would be to adopt the ordinance. Are there any questions about the adopting the ordinance? That was the subject of the public hearing. If not, is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by John, seconded by Craig. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Kyle?
Mayor Burns,
Yes.
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
yes,
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
yes,
Jim Lozinski.
Yes.
And that motion does pass. We'll now move to agenda item number 3. This is the also public hearing on the landscaping and storage. Once again, I'll ask Ilya Gutman to open this public hearing. Ilya?
Thank you, Mayor Council. In this case, the changes are very limited, and mostly the result of some of addition of the tree policy and introduction of the interim use permit to the city ordinance. So again, all the changes are mostly technical and some just clarifications. So nothing significant at all.
Okay. Input as part of the public hearing from the council?
Mr. Mayor, Russell Labatt again, just a question for Ilya on B3. Ilya, it says
Yes.
overgrown vegetation and sizable broken limbs shall be trimmed. Dead or severely damaged trees shall be replaced. Do they have the option of just removing them and not replacing? Can that be changed to be, shall be removed and or replaced?
As you can see, this was not a change. This is the way it was before. I think the idea is that it applies only to required trees. So if, for example, the ordinance requires 5 trees and one of them is dead, yes, and in theory it should be replaced. If trees are over the required number, then no. Maybe it may actually justify some clarification here.
but they would not have to be replaced.
Right, if they are not required.
Okay,
Well, note for the record, Councilmember Meister has joined us or has connected. Other input as part of this public hearing?
I have a question on A3. A2. It says trees planted within or adjacent to public right of way. When we get to or adjacent to, is that not private property? If we're not in the public right of way, are we getting to the point now we're telling people what they can actually do in their own yards?
It is, but it is also part of the tree policy. If you remember, basically it talks about if you have a tree which is growing over the public right of way and interferes with public right of way. That's what it is about. So it is still about public right of way, even though we are talking about trees adjacent to public right of way.
Which would be in somebody's private property or their yard. So now we're dictating what people can do in their private property. I'm opposed to that greatly.
So Ilya, the example would be the tree that was off the public right of way. The growth of that tree is in the public right of way, either interfering with traffic or equipment or snow plows bump into it. Would that be the reason to have that language there?
Correct. It's, for example, my tree grows over the sidewalk, so I trimmed it. So that's what it is about. It is about that people can go under the tree, for example, or traffic can go under the trees.
And it's no different than a hedge that's put on the private side of the sidewalk and allowed to overgrow that you can't even walk on the sidewalk.
So this is more designed to trim a tree, not tell somebody what kind of tree to plant, which I don't have a problem with that. I want to be careful we're not dictating what kind of trees are planted in your yard, but I'm not opposed to having people trim their trees. So is that the way this is meant to read?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
And
thank you.
Jason, you have a comment?
Thank you, Mayor. I think I would offer another situation, and that would be the site triangle. If you're on a corner lot, you're not supposed to plant a tree in the site triangle for intersection safety. So that could also be an instance where the tree policy would have something to say on private property.
Okay. Other input as part of this public hearing?
I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by, was that Jim? By Steve.
No, Steve.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve, to close the public hearing. Discussion? If not, Kyle, will you take the vote?
Mayor Burns,
Yes.
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
Yes.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
yes,
Jim Lozinski.
Yes,
And the motion does pass. We'll now consider the ordinance that would provide that amending of the landscape and storage. Questions about the ordinance as it was presented at the public hearing? If not, is there a
approval.
motion? Motion by Craig. Is there a second? Seconded by John. Discussion? If not,
I just
go ahead, Jim.
want to say, I don't like the landscaping ordinance. I didn't like it before. I'm not going to support it because I just think it's overstepped too much by government into private property.
Other discussion on the motion? If not, Kyle, will you take the vote?
Mayor Burns,
Yes.
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
Yes.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
no,
Jim Lozinski.
No,
The motion does pass 5-2. We'll move then to agenda item number 5. Agenda item number 5 would be also public hearing on the vacation of a utility easement and the Wilkie Miller Busing 7th edition. So we'll have a public hearing on the resolution that would grant the petition to vacate the utility easement, and following that, then we'll consider the resolution. I'll call on Jason Anderson to conduct this public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor. You can see the map that's proposed in front of you. That's the area in question. So we did receive a signed petition for the vacation of that utility easement. At one point in time, there was a property line centered on that easement, and in a later replatting, that property line was moved, and we established easements around the new perimeter of the lot. We have reached out to all the utilities to inquire about their presence in the utility easement, and there are none to date that we've heard of, and we've gotten back a lot of comments. So staff would propose to carry forward with the vacation of the easement.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Input as part of the public hearing? Any input from the council? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion.
Motion.
Motion by Steve, seconded by John to close the public hearing. Discussion? If not, Kyle, will you take the vote?
Mayor Burns.
Yes.
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
Yes.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
yes,
Jim Lozinski.
Yes,
And the motion does pass. We'll now consider the resolution that would grant the petition to vacate the utility easement. Is there
I'll
a
make
motion?
that motion.
Motion
second,
by, seconded by Russ. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Kyle?
Mayor Burns.
Yes.
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
Yes.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
yes,
Jim Lozinski.
Yes,
And the motion does pass. Move to agenda item number 6. This would be consider the award of bids for the Legion Field Stormwater Improvement Project Phase 1. We have a resolution that would accept the bid and award the contract. So the council does have the information about the bids as they have been received. Jason, do you want to provide any detail?
Thanks, Mayor. I guess I would just mention that we got 4 bids. We received good bids, and staff certainly recommends awarding to the low bidder, Town and Country of Garvin.
Questions the council has?
Jason, I have a couple quick questions. I had a homeowner come up to me, really concerned about the softball fields. And I just didn't quite have the answer at the time. Are the softball fields going to be returned to softball fields, or is one becoming a water retention pond?
Do we have a diagram in this packet? I don't know that we do. No, we're not. We're the ball fields with the lights on the nearest Kendall and Legion Field. That ball field will not be impacted. The basin in the park will be just south of that ball field. I do suppose the other field may have its outfield shortened, but without having the map up, we couldn't really review that. But the ball fields themselves will not be directly affected. They'll still be there. I just don't know how that affects the outfield of the one ball field. I can't tell you right now, but
I appreciate that. That answers my question. I can relay that to the gentleman who's asking about it. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions for Jason regarding the recommendation for the award of this contract?
I make a motion to award the contract.
Second.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Craig. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Kyle?
Mayor Burns.
Yes.
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
No.
Glenn Bearcooler,
Yes.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
no,
Jim Lozinski.
Yes,
And the motion does pass. Jason, do you want to talk about the timing of this project, as well as the risk that we have until this project is completed with additional stormwater flooding up in that area?
Sure. Yeah, this project is the first of three phases. This builds on a stormwater study that we completed with Bolton and Mink, I believe in 2018. Um, it addresses flooding and flooding risk in the neighborhood. There was some power outages related to flooding in this area, some property damage as a result. This project is certainly motivated by all of that. And it's the first of three phases to address it. This contract should begin sometime within the next month, I would imagine, but we haven't had a meeting with our contractor yet. But we would expect quick movement, and the deadline would be the end of the year. And we think it'll be a great benefit to the area. So,
Thank you. We'll move then to the consent agenda. The three items on the consent agenda this evening. First, to consider the authorization to declare vehicles as surplus property for the Marshall Police Department. Second would be consider the authorization to declare bicycles as surplus property for the Marshall Police Department. Third item on the consent agenda is consider the approval of the bills and the project payments. So is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the council wants removed for separate discussion?
Item
Mr.
8,
Mayor.
please.
Item 8, I heard that. Any other item? So the remaining items with agenda item number 7 and 9. Is there a motion to approve those items on the consent
So
agenda?
moved.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Craig. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Kyle?
Mayor Burns,
Yes?
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
Yes.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
Yes.
Jim Lozinski.
Yes.
The motion does pass. Agenda item number 8, the authorization to declare bicycles as surplus property for the Marshall Police Department. John, I think, was that you that asked for this to be discussed?
Yes, it was. What I'd like to request is that there is a group in Marshall that does repair bikes to give them to kids in need at primarily middle school, but covering any of the schools. And there's also a nonprofit organization that there's been conversations with. It's called Bikes for Kids out of Minneapolis that would also like to have the opportunity to go through the bicycles that have been abandoned and see if those bikes could be by private means transported to the Bikes for Kids in Minneapolis, and in return they will provide bikes as well to be given away to kids in Marshall area. So I'm requesting that that authorization be made as well as declaring the material surplus.
Thank you, John. I know Public Safety Director Marshall is here, and you would probably be amenable to that
Sure.
suggestion
Yep,
also.
not a problem. Typically, we use two organizations, and one is the Marshall School District. The second one is our Sentence to Serve program. But if there's anybody else that wants to take a look at them, they're more than willing. Councilman DeCramer, if you have a connection, you can give them my name, and we'll move forward in that direction with one out of the cities as well.
I will certainly do that. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So they would still be declared as surplus property. So is there a motion to that effect?
I will make that motion.
I would make that. And I would second that motion.
Motion by John, seconded by Steve. Discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
is there a way to hardwire this so that any bikes have that same process and the same donation option so that we don't need to do it again? Because I was going to say the same thing as John did.
Yes.
Just make it a standard for bicycles to go
Right.
through that process.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Kyle?
Mayor Burns,
Yes.
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
Yes.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
yes,
Jim Lozinski.
Yes,
And the motion does pass. We'll move then to agenda item number 10. Consider the approval of the City of Marshall COVID-19 preparedness plan. I'll call on City Administrator Sharon Hanson, who will then turn it to Sheila Dubs.
So the governor has required critical and non-critical businesses, in addition to all the other orders, to have a COVID-19 preparedness plan in place. As you all know, the city of Marshall has, since mid-March, when this began, has had multiple policies, procedures, direction to staff and clients or customers regarding how we'll approach safety in our workplace. So this really just formalizes what we've really already been doing. The League of Minnesota Cities presented a template for all the cities to use, and HR Director Sheila Dubs did fine tune it a little bit to fit the city of Marshall and what we've been doing. So I don't know if Sheila, if you had anything to add, otherwise it's pretty straightforward.
Yes, thank you. The only other thing I would add is that the governor has required all communities to approve this plan by June 29th. And since there isn't another meeting scheduled, I would request that if there are any revisions requested by the council, that those revisions be included in your motion to approve this evening so that we are in compliance with the law.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Sharon. Questions that the council has?
Mr. Mayor, just a question for Sharon or any city employees, city staff that are there. How are we monitoring social distancing amongst employees and breaks and things like that? Because they, according to this, employees must be at least 6 feet apart.
Yep.
How
Well,
how are we monitoring that? I don't want to use the word enforcing, but how are we monitoring that?
let me just say that it doesn't, to me, whether you're an employee or a general citizen, it's really hard to maintain 6 feet distance, even if you're really, really intent on staying away from people. And what occurs is people tend to drift to each other, whether that be interacting with somebody out in the public or our very own employees. So it is a learning process. You would think now, 3 months later, that we'd have it all down, but we're just not used to that as a society and as human beings. So it's really just random reinforcement by the supervisors, and hopefully encouraging them to do it. Have I seen it? Yes, I have. I've seen less than 6 feet. It could be street department workers peering over a piece of equipment, and they're all kind of standing together. That has happened before, and I've also seen, again, some customer interactions because it's really hard to kind of stay apart. So just really random reinforcement and trying to encourage it. We haven't done any discipline or enforcement. It's really hard to maintain. So
Thank you,
that's my
Sharon.
answer.
Thank you, Sharon. I don't necessarily need it to be enforced, but I agree with you totally with your example. Street department employees or park and rec employees or whomever. I mean, it's pretty hard for them to stay 6 feet apart when they're doing, whether it be tree trimming or patching on the streets or whatever. But I think it's just an awareness that we keep reminding the employees that they try to per se maintain the distance. So thank you.
Yeah. And that might be a good message to kind of send out again this week, because, maybe we're all getting a little bit relaxed with the testing data and things like that, but we need to kind of keep it up because it's still important.
Other questions or input from the council?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Steve.
I'm going to put my medical hat on here, but it's not only the 6 feet, but it's also the time. So the studies will say 10 to 15 minutes and 6 feet. So as long as if you're within that 6 feet and you're less than 10 minutes, the risk is still low, not as low as if you'd maintain the 6 feet, but it's still low. So I think, again, a shadow of a leader, supervisors should lead by example. If there's a way to separate after that 10 minutes, go get a drink of water, do something. I think that will help immensely. because this is in for the long haul. And like Sharon said, we got to get this. Human beings are not programmed to do this, and so this is a reprogramming of human behavior, and it's going to be a long time coming.
Thank you, Dr. Meister. Other questions or input? If not, is there a motion to approve the preparedness plan?
So move.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Kyle, will you take the vote?
Mayor Burns,
Yes?
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
Yes.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
yes,
Jim Lozinski.
Yes,
The motion passes. We'll move then to agenda item number 11, the introduction of the ordinance amendment to permit some slaughtering of animals in the butcher shops and general business district and industrial districts, and to permit landscaping business in the general industrial district. So the action is to introduce and to call for a public hearing. Jason, would you want to? Oh, Ilya. Ilya can provide any other detail, but again, this is introduction and calling for the public hearing. So, Ilya, if you have any comments, otherwise you can respond to questions.
Thank you, Mayor Council. This is just about a business owner who approached the city and wanted to have a butcher shop in Marshall. And in the process of discussing that with them, we figured out that there will be some slaughtering done. So we did a review of the ordinance and discovered that it's impossible to do anywhere in the city. So that's why we kind of looked at the whole thing, and that's how the changes came to be.
And Ilya, this was also discussed at the Planning Commission.
Correct. It went through the Planning Commission. It was also went through the Legislative and Ordinance Committee.
Any other input from the council?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'm in support of this. I think that it's a good move, and I think that there's a lot of demand in the public for this option for to meet what you eat. And so I think this is a good idea, and I support it.
John, you're like,
Just to point out one addition on this, there is a phrase in the ordinance that says limited slaughter. And that, although is not a legal term, as we discussed in L&O, it is a indication that this will be reviewed, and there very likely will be limitations put on the slaughtering. That could be a time limitation, a number limitation, or type of animal. It really depends on the individual's situations. But the term limited slaughter is in there to trigger both the Planning Commission and City Council that that is very much a topic of discussion in each particular instance.
thank you, John. Any other input?
Just a
If not-
reminder that we do currently have slaughter of animals happening in town at a fairly significant scale. So it's not like this is something new in the community. It's just not a butcher shop.
Any other input? If not, is there a motion to introduce and call for a public hearing on this?
So move.
I would so move.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to the vote.
Mayor Burns,
Yes?
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
Yes.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
yes,
Jim Lozinski.
yes,
And the motion does pass. We'll move to agenda item number 12. This is a request for a variance adjustment permit for Trent and Becky White. Location is 101 East Marshall Street. Ilya? You want to make the recommendation?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Council. If you look at the aerial photo of this thing, and, you will see that the house actually right now protrudes into the required front yard, and actually it almost touches the property line. So the owner wants to add an entry to the left of that protruding part of the house. It will not go beyond the already existing part of the house, and actually the house on the other side of Park Avenue also comes almost to the property line. So it's in this case it meets all the requirements by the ordinance for recommending granting the variance. That's what the recommendation is.
Okay, thank you, Ilya. Are there any questions for Ilya?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just one clarification. I believe in the council item, it says West Main Street as the address. So just to make sure that the motion isn't saying that also.
And
West
it is,
Marshall, Craig. Not West Main, West Marshall.
Or Marshall, I meant, yeah. But it says West Marshall in the document, and I believe it is East Marshall is the address.
the correct address is 101 East Marshall Street. Okay,
I would
Any
make
other-
a motion to approve.
motion by Craig. Is there a second?
I would
I'll
second
second.
that motion.
Seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to the vote. Kyle, will you take the vote?
Mayor Burns,
Yes?
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
yes,
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
Yes,
Jim Lozinski.
Yes,
And the motion does pass. We'll move then to agenda item number 13. This is the request for a map amendment rezoning for James R. Swenson and T.S. Swenson. The location is 1111 Canoga Park Drive. Ilya, once again.
Thank you, Mayor Council. This is, if you look at the map, the aerial photo again, let's look at the aerial photo first. This is a empty lot next to the existing duplex. You can see that there are 3 empty lots there right now. The 2 northernmost lots are zoned already B3 general business, and this one is currently zoned as R2, 1 to 4 family dwellings. The owner of all those 3 lots wants to use them for parking, and parking is not permitted in residential lots. So the request is to rezone it so that all 3 of those lots may be used for parking. I just want to know that as a requirement, there's a requirement in the ordinance that parking that borders residential districts has to have some fence or live barrier to prevent the usual light and sound going into the residential area. And the owner said that I believe there is already fence there or something like that to prevent this thing. So recommendation is to introduce this thing so that it can be approved next time.
Okay, I'll open up for questions that the council has on this recommendation. I'll also note for the council that Mr. Swenson is present here if there are any specific questions for him. Any input or questions? If not, you have the
Move to approve.
second,
motion by, was that Steve?
It was, sir.
Okay, motion by Steve, seconded by Jim, right?
yes,
Correct.
Now, discussion on the motion. If not, Kyle, will you take the vote?
Mayor Burns,
Yes.
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
yes,
John DeCramer. John DeCramer,
Trying to get mine off mute. Yes.
Russ Labatt,
yes,
Jim Lozinski.
yes,
And the motion does pass. Agenda item number 14, request for a map amendment rezoning for requested by Action Company LLC for 1209 and 1211 West Main Street. Once again, I'll call on Ilya to present this.
Thank you, Mayor Council. Again, this thing is connected to the business opportunity. The owner wants to have a landscaping business in that area. You can see that there are two lots along West Main Street. And those lots are zoned right now general business. However, the lots to the northwest of that thing is industrial, and also the lots across the street are industrial. The landscaping business is not permitted in general business, and but it will be permitted in general industrial districts. So the request obviously is business related and reasonable. So because adjacent areas are also already zoned industrial, so recommendation is to introduce and approve it next time. It went through the planning commission, and the recommendation was to approve it.
Okay, thank you, Ilya. Any questions from the council?
I move approval.
Second,
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to.
Bob, or Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I'm looking at the ordinance there. Do you have that? The resolution.
okay.
I'm just wondering about the date. June, it says July 14th, and that's because of the 30 days, or
Oh.
what, or why do we have the 14th day of July there?
The Ilya, do you have any response to that?
Let me look at it quickly here.
So it's on the screen. I guess the question would be, why not today's date, the 23rd of June? Jason, you may have a.
I maybe that is a mistake. I don't. I think the previous one was on the next meeting, I believe.
Aren't we just calling for a public hearing in this one?
Mr. Mayor, typically with ordinances, ordinances need to be introduced before acted on.
Okay. Yes, that's a point of correction, is that this would be introduced and then at the July 14th meeting would be up for adoption.
I just have a question. So then it's clear with the previous agenda item too, that it was an introduction, not the passing of the ordinance.
That is
correct.
That is
Rezoning is a change of ordinance, so it has to be introduced and adopted on the next council meeting.
Thank you, Ilya, for that clarification. Glenn, you're okay with that?
And that's fine, yes.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Kyle?
Mayor Burns,
Yes.
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
Yes.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
Yes,
Jim Lozinski.
yes,
The motion does pass. Agenda item number 15, the Michigan Road Superior Road Reconstruction Project. We have a change order to consider, and which is the final change order and the acknowledgement of the final pay request. Jason.
Thank you, Mayor. Not too much to say about this item. It is a final pay request for the Michigan Road and Superior Road Construction Project from a couple years back. Finally got everything tidied up to the way we liked it. We got some warranty work completed, and we're ready to issue final payment to the contractor and put this one to rest. Looks like we had a total contract amount of just a little over $1 million. It's about $4,000 over budget.
Question for Jason?
Mr. Mayor,
Move approval.
Yes.
so the question I have for Jason is, you said $4,000 over budget?
Correct.
What was the primary driver of that $4,000 over budget?
If you review the final pay application, there really is nothing in particular. There were just some minor quantity changes and adjustments that resulted in a slight project increase. There's nothing really that jumps out that was the culprit on this project.
Thank you.
I think this is a good project, given the challenges that were encountered with the weather. We remember 2 years ago, it was extremely wet during the time period when this project was completed, and really completed in a nice fashion. Good
Mm.
product.
Very good point, Mayor. Yep.
Jason, when you say 4,000 over budget, that's not including the contingency. So this falls well within the contingency range of the project, correct?
That's correct. It's another good observation and a good thing to point out. It was $4,000 over the contract amount, but well within the contingency that were afforded by the council.
And I move approval.
Motion by Craig. Is there a second?
Second,
Seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Kyle?
Mayor Burns,
Yes.
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
Yes.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
yes,
Jim Lozinski.
yes.
And the motion does pass. We'll move then to commission board liaison reports. The Fire Relief Association has not met since we last met. The Southwest Regional Development Commission revolving loan fund, because of, as I previously mentioned, they have received a additional $1.42 million for a COVID revolving loan fund. I chair that revolving loan fund. And so we are meeting, acting on loan applications actually twice a week at this point. There's lots of activity there at 0% for the first year, deferred payments of principal for the first 3 months, and then termed out as long as the need is there. And the interest rate during that term would be 75% of prime, which right now is about 2.4%. So lots of activity with that fund right now, and that includes the SRDC covers a 9-county area, but there is activity in the Marshall and Lyon County area for that fund also. So with that, Craig?
I have nothing to report, Mr. Mayor.
Steve?
No report.
Glenn?
The Planning Commission met on June 10th, and the Planning Commission acted on agenda items number 11, 12, 13, and 14 that we acted on tonight. And then the Legislative and Ordinance Committee met and acted on agenda item number 11 that we talked about tonight. That's it.
Thank you, Glenn. John?
EDA did meet, and primary action there was changeover in officers. Stacy Frost is now chair of the EDA. And we also welcomed Brad Strutman to the committee and did a number of committee assignments, made those changes as appropriate. Marshall Utilities also met on June 16th, and items of note there are, first of all, the leadership is remaining intact as it was this past year, primarily to smooth the transition for the new general manager. David Shelkoff was approved the contract was approved formally at the meeting. So he will be starting approximately, I'm going to say it's the 1st of August out in there. Also, note is that Chair Cindy Riscazzi has received the Missouri River Energy Service Community Leader Award That occurred at the virtual meeting that was in South Dakota, or Sioux Falls, South Dakota, at Missouri River. And this was the first opportunity of an actual meeting, and she was formally presented with that award. So, as a community leader recognized by Missouri River. So, and that's it.
Okay, thank you, John. The, let me see, who's, Russ
Mine have not met.
and Jim.
I have nothing.
Okay, then we'll move then to, council member individual items. Jim, let's start on your end.
I actually don't have anything tonight.
Okay, Russ?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. After our last meeting, in the paper, we talked about at the meeting, we talked about the chiller at the Red Baron Arena. The following morning, about midday, I received a call from an engineer that used to work at Schwann's. And they said, and he wasn't pointing fingers at anybody. He just said, maybe something that you should take a look at. He said, is when the brine temperature reaches 40 to 45 degrees, brine could cause corrosion from shutting down. So he said, if you shut it down for 2 or 3 days, it doesn't make any difference. But if you shut it down for a longer period of time, he said, such as you did, it could be a cause of the corrosion. So I told Preston that. Preston checked with his engineers, or the engineers he's been dealing with, and he said, no, they didn't think that was an issue. In the meantime, just what is today? Tuesday, last Friday, I believe, I had another engineer call me, works at ADM. He said the same thing as the first engineer that worked at Schwann's. He said, you may want to take a look at the time period that you shut it down. He said, so, and again, neither one of them are pointing fingers. They're just trying to offer solutions to city staff to maybe, you know, and I said, maybe when we get the analyzation back with the pipes, that'll point us in the right direction. But I felt it was very worthwhile that citizens are calling and offering suggestions and or maybe solutions at the same time. So something for the staff to look at, and hopefully we can find an answer. But that's all I have.
Okay, John?
Nothing on my end.
Okay, Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One item, I did get a call in the past couple of weeks regarding some concerns about a wouldn't call dangerous, but a vicious animal that has a history of attacking other dogs. And the concern is more about the leash law and some conflicts within our leash law. And I discussed this a little bit with our community service officer who does most of the footwork and enforcement on it. And I've also spoken to Chief Marshall about it. And my suggestion is to possibly have the PD, city attorney, and our legislative and ordinance commission just review the leash law and do some comparatives and maybe look at some discrepancies in there that talk, you know, kind of have conflicting statements about animals and the leash requirements on public right of ways and public property and that type of thing, just to close some loose ends and possibly make it a little bit more understandable and a little bit more enforceable for the good of both all the pet owners and the public regarding animals that may be a little bit over interested or over energized, and some of them maybe even be overly aggressive. So that's just my recommendation. And I told the concerned citizens that I would bring it forward, and I've had a pretty good discussion, like I say, with Cliff, and I think there's some good opportunity there. Maybe take a look at that. So that's my recommendation, my request. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Craig, and Dennis, you'll follow up on that.
Suggestion. We'll follow through with that.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only thing that I had is a constituent brought up the idea of proposing a commission on diversity in the city of Marshall. Not sure that we have that, but it's certainly, with everything going on, it's something to ponder. So I said I would bring it up, and I think it's got validity. We just need to figure out what's the use of that commission, what's the purpose. I'm not in favor of having a commission for the sake of having a commission. I am in favor of having a commission to make sure that all peoples are represented and have input on the policies that we generate.
thank you, Steve. Good suggestion. We do have in our code of ordinance, we do have a human rights commission that has been actually dormant for a while, and this may be an opportunity for not recreating a commission, but re-energizing the human rights commission. So maybe we could have staff follow up on that, especially the staff as well as council that has been part of the Kyle, help me with the term, the diversity cohort, that
Race equity, yes.
race equity cohort that has been active for probably a couple of years in the region, but the city has been an active participant in it. So, John, I believe you're the council member that also has been active in the race equity cohort.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So then, Glenn,
I have nothing.
the only thing I have is, this goes back a number of years, 40 actually, when Dutch elm disease was at its height, and we still do have some Dutch elm disease trees that are Dutch elm susceptible trees that are in the area. And we do have a couple that are dead on East Main Street that are in the boulevard. So that probably prompts us to kind of revisit that once very active policy. But we still need to remove those diseased trees. That's all that I have, unless, Jason, do you have?
Can I address
Yes, please.
our street superintendent has reached out to MinDOT and they've given him assurance that they would take care of those trees. They're in their right of way, so.
Very good. Good. Well, that's very good because they're very large trees. So good. With that, then we'll move to staff reports. Sharon.
Mr. Mayor and Council, just to add to Councilmember Meister's suggestion on diversity, we actually do have it in our strategic plan as well to formulate a diversity commission or committee. I can't remember the exact terminology. So, and I did actually get an email from an interested community member that's done some work in that area. So now that some of the COVID work is kind of lightening up, we can maybe kind of focus in on that strategic plan. But the Human Rights Commission and the work of the race equity cohort, it will be helpful in that discussion as well. So I just want to add that. Several other items. I do want to mention that the community-wide testing by Avera, which I know that when it started, it was really conveyed to the community as a collaborative venture with public health, the county, the city, and Avera. And I do think that that's what happened. We really came together to provide testing on a wide scale basis. And you probably have read some of the numbers from that, over 1,000 tests, but really good compliments about city staff from Avera staff, just the people that were present, the volunteer leads, the actual volunteers. And we put a lot of time in addition to what Avera did, but it was really good to hear some good feedback from Avera. So that was grateful. Do want to mention that Lauren Dietz is, now that there's a little more opportunity for meeting with people, has really begun to pick up her time meeting with different businesses and so forth. Today, Minnesota Deed grant was released. It's actually one of the first times that the state has given an actual grant as a result of COVID. And there's going to be a lot of interest across the state for this particular grant, so much so that if you meet the requirements, which are pretty basic, that they're actually going to put your name or the business name in a lottery system, and that'll determine who gets funding. And this is why, in addition to this funding, that the city and county really does need to get the CARES Act funding that was discussed in the special session. It was not agreed upon by the Senate and the House and the governor. Very important for us. We're allocated to get $1 million. The county is over $3 million. And we can actually use some of our expenses to date on COVID to get reimbursed. And another portion of the CARES Act will be for business grants, EDA assistance. And $1 million sounds like a lot, and maybe we won't be able to spend it all. And if so, we are required to send it back to the state and federal government. But I theoretically could see half of that money being utilized for EDA, business assistance, or grants. And as we approach our 2021 budget and the strain that businesses have felt from COVID, that's something that may help kind of ease where we need to be in 2021. We today, or maybe it was yesterday, our 2021 budget numbers were due from supervisors and division directors. We're still working on that, and we hope to have a really clear picture here in a couple more weeks. We at this time are really just budgeting as is normal, just to kind of see what it would look like, and then go from there. I do believe that that we'll initiate some discussions with unions on 2021 and talk about revenue shortfall and things like that. And so that's kind of some of the future work that we're going to do with 2021 and where we're at. At this time, we're still kind of in a holding pattern to see what the impacts were in reality, rather than just kind of projecting them out in terms of revenue shortfall. So that's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Questions for Sharon? If not, Jason?
I don't know that I have anything specific to report, but I can try to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Question for Jason?
Jason, Russ here. Progress on 4th Street. Do you know when that construction is going to start?
Yeah, our last communication with the contractor was they indicated the week right after the 4th of July. And when they come in, we expect it to really start to move fast. They'll come in with a couple underground crews and really move. So I believe that's still the latest timetable.
Anticipation to be done prior to school?
That project will not be done prior to school. We'll be working on 4th Street right up until late fall, and hopefully the snow is not flying. So it'll go through school for sure. And South 1st Street, we still do not have a defined date with our contractor. We have not met with them to discuss. So.
Any other question for Jason?
Jason, John DeCramer, I just you may want to address the hotel demolition. Will be starting tomorrow.
Yes, that's the latest information that I've got, unless Sharon, you've heard anything else. But I believe tomorrow at some point we expect the project to start, and the demo would start in the rear of the building from the alley going forward, because they're still working with MnDOT to get lane closures approved for work out front.
That's correct.
Any other questions? If not, thank you, Jason. Dennis?
Jason, you'll stay right there.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. A couple of weeks ago, I got an anonymous letter from a citizen complaining about long grass, unlicensed vehicles, a number of complaints that on the Lind Street, 6th Street, and Kendall Street areas. I forwarded that on to the city building officials, and then unlicensed vehicles goes to the Marshall Police Department. This week, I got a thank you note from the same anonymous citizen saying, thank you for hearing the concerns and addressing the concerns. So thank you to building folks, and thank you to the PD for checking that out. It's nice to get a thank you instead of a complaint.
Rare, but appreciated.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else, Dennis?
Nothing else.
Okay. With that, the council has the remaining items, which are the information items and the listing of upcoming meetings. Is there anything else to come forward in this regular session? If not, is there a motion to?
So move.
I'll second.
Motion by, seconded by John. Discussion? If not,
Mr. Mayor,
yes, Steve.
I just want to say one final thing, kind of piggybacking on City Administrator Sharon Hanson. The collaboration, the work between PD, the City of Marshall employees, the county, Southwest Health and Human Services was exemplary, and the state is going to take it away in their playbook and copy it. So the City of Marshall is leading the state, which makes me really proud.
Well said, Steve. Thank you. With that, we'll do a voice vote on the motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
I,
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passed unanimously. We will reconvene in work session, Sharon.
I could get them to come earlier than 7, like 6:45. Would you want to move that up?
Would the council be available at 6:45 for the work session?
Certainly would be.
yes.
That would be fine.
Yes.
Sure.
We'll plan to reconnect for a 6:45 PM work session. Thank you.